Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of MP5 Inside the Industry, presented by the 5-Star Institute and sponsored by today, SWBC. Today, we're going to be speaking with Chuck Mureddu. He's the SVP Chief Valuation and Compliance Officer at SWBC. Chuck, thanks for speaking with us and welcome to the show.
Thanks, David. It's good to be here.
So obviously, we are currently in a down market. You don't have to look far to see that and all the ways that that's playing out. I know one of the things that people are concerned about and that you're here to talk about today is just concerns that people may have over property values and how things like appraiser bias, appraisal shortage, appraiser shortages could impact those factors. So to start with, Chuck, let's look at appraisal values and how those are adjusting to the current market fluctuations that we're seeing. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So fluctuations in the market, as we all know, happen all the time. And certainly over the past 10 years, we've been experiencing, in some cases, dramatic upward trends that presented unique challenges for appraisers. So appraisers have specific standards they need to follow, and those standards require the appraiser to provide a credible opinion of value. That includes a thorough analysis of the market, recognizing leading indicators such as list to sale price ratios, days on the market, contract sales, contract dates versus closing dates, and inventory, and then applying them to the market and making the time adjustments when appropriate. It really makes no sense if values are increasing or decreasing. The housing market has been pretty hot for quite some time, and in some areas, the market is still holding well. But in many areas, we are seeing a market shifting, kind of on the downward trend. Buyer enthusiasm is kind of diminishing in some markets, and it's taking longer for houses to sell. So sellers are starting to drop prices in some of these areas. Kind of interesting because we're only talking around maybe a six month difference, really, if you look at that, as compared to the huge boom that we saw. With these downward shifts in the market, appraisers will really need to constantly look at all those elements I mentioned and then identify and adjust as needed. Not all markets are alike, and trends will most likely reveal that certain segments of the market are also acting differently. So for instance, large, high-priced homes may be dropping at a higher rate than the more affordable homes. So the appraiser's analysis should look at both macro and micro data. And the old saying is that real estate is local, and that's still true. So that said, appraisers are going to need to be very mindful and realize that lenders and secondary market participants, including the GSEs, have more time during down cycles and are already looking at appraisals and all valuation products, for that matter, I'd say more carefully and reviewing for inconsistencies and lack of support. So those participants have a large amount of data and the sophistication that allows them to drill down quite effectively to understand not only trends in the marketplace, but how the appraisers are adjusting appropriately for most of the items on the report.
Well, you mentioned the wealth of data that's out there. And for the next question, I'm curious, people who are looking to purchase a home, there is so much data out there from so many different sources, and someone who's a layman coming into this, I'm sure it could be overwhelming. So how can you address a customer's home value concerns when the appraisal value varies from what they might find on sites such as Zillow or other sites like that?
Yeah, so, homeowners and borrowers, really anybody, most lay people do use Zillow, and there's several different resources that are online there. The bottom line, accurate appraisals are essential to the integrity of the mortgage lending, and undervaluation can prevent a homeowner from accessing, accumulated equity in their homes, for instance, or while overvaluation could decrease affordability, make it harder for someone to sell their home in the future, or even increase the risk of foreclosure. So, for instance, there are qualitative elements that need to be considered that may be missed, like quality or condition, or the existence of an externality that may either benefit or be a detriment to the subject's marketability. We look at, railroad tracks or high wire lines or, anything like that. So, that's something that's not going to really be caught on an automated system. And many times we'll be, asked to look at additional data, and right away, just by looking at the photos or even the map, we always say master the photos and master the map, even when we're looking at appraisals, we can tell if they are truly comparable to the subject. The borrower may not understand that not all listings and sales are comps. right? There's a huge difference. So that said, borrowers should always have the right to challenge an appraisal, especially when they see an error on the report. Maybe the subject property was not properly represented, such as maybe missing updates, or maybe an addition that was added and the appraiser missed it. Did they have a finished basement that was left out? And then maybe there was a sale that was just closed right down the street. And, homeowners do have a keen eye as to what's happening and going around in their own neighborhood. And sometimes appraisers can miss that. So it's important that every lender and also their partners, such as AMCs like us, have a very detailed process in place to ensure borrowers are given a fair and thoughtful opportunity to dispute the value. And if they feel that there are factual errors or other concerns or omissions, inadequate comparable properties that were used, or provide evidence that the appraisal was influenced in a biased way, they should have that ability to be able to go back and ask for a rebuttal. And that also means managing the process and making sure to work with the appraiser to expedite a very detailed and thoughtful response, because the borrower is putting a lot of time and effort to provide the information, and it's important that we really provide a good, clear understanding to the borrower or homeowner, whoever's asking for the rebuttal, that they can understand in a very good way. So we do see appraisals being corrected, and yes, at times the value is revised. So
well, you touched on appraisal bias and how critical that is to make sure you're accounting for and trying to avoid. Obviously, another one of the big topics that comes up anytime we talk about appraisals with anybody we speak to is just the manpower and the shortage of appraisers that we had seen, particularly during the pandemic and all that was going on. What does that landscape look like now? Are you still seeing shortages, and what does that mean for lenders and servicers who are needing these services?
Yeah, so it's funny, because when we started talking about appraiser shortages, and we've been talking about that for like 10 years, so oh my God, we've been talking about more than 10 years, I think. But I think it is an issue. You could talk to probably 100 different people and they have different thoughts about appraiser shortage. The idea is that, is there a myth to it, or is it real? Let's face it, the appraiser pool is only getting older, and it is shrinking. So over 20% of appraisers are over 66 years old, and with about 50% between the ages of 51 to 65. And so we know the appraiser population will continue to shrink. And modernization efforts that are out there with new alternative products that the GSEs have come up with, that they're going to help. And they have helped, as we saw during the pandemic, but there will always be the need for appraisers to perform many of the alternative products and services, as well as full appraisals for either more complex properties, higher risk, or higher LTV loans, for instance. As the purchase market slows, data gets less abundant, and therefore some models may become less reliable, thus triggering the need for an appraisal. And I'll tell you, I'm already seeing that now. We get a lot of AVM data that's coming in, and especially in the more, say, suburban and rural markets, we're seeing that they're not really hitting well, or the data is just not that great out there. We're not seeing a lot of information that's being provided in the AVM. So there's less reliability to that. And so then we're having the lenders coming back and say, listen, you know what? We want to upgrade this to a full appraisal. And it's funny, because they tend to be upgrading to a full appraisal rather than going into one of the alternative products right now. I think that's going to change over time. But right now, they're using full appraisals. So I do think we need to fix the shortage issue and get new fresh blood into the industry. It's also very important that we bring diversity into the industry. We currently have a very limited diversity within the appraiser workforce, and that really needs to be fixed. So we all need to play a part in helping make that happen. So shortage, is it real? Only time's going to tell, because we can't always predict the demand in the mortgage market, and supply and demand for appraisers is different depending on where you live. So, I mean, it may be different in, say, Jacksonville, Florida, than it is in Atlanta, Georgia. I know Atlanta, has a huge appraiser population there as compared to others. And then one thing to also consider is, if we see defaults and foreclosures rising, will lenders tighten up and again require a more in-depth appraisal? This has been an issue for quite some time. Like I said, I think probably over 10 years. And we need to do a better job in recruitment, training, and remove some of the barriers to entry so we can attract the next generation as well.
Well, that's some great thoughts and insights, Chuck. Thank you so much for joining us today on MP5. Really appreciate your time and your thoughts.
Great. No, thank you, David. Appreciate it. Appreciate the time.
MP5 is a resource for industry information. I hope you liked what you've been watching so far. If you have any questions, please reach out to events@the5star.com. Like, follow, and subscribe both YouTube and LinkedIn to stay up to date on all of our news and releases.